Skullgirls, Mike Z, Alex Ahad, Mariel Cartwright, and John Kim. Joining them is Derek Yu.
Hi.
Who's awesome.
Yeah!
And then joining them is James Montagna from.
Also, yeah!
I brought this panel together because I kind of wanted to. Well, I wanted to kind of represent indie games at AOD, but not everyone like indie. First of all, indie games is also kind of like a loaded title, but in general, not everyone fits a very specific that set of like title. But but what they all have in common is that they work in small studios as opposed to like a big AAA type of boutique thing. And all the games they make are they have a lot of control over it, and they're very personal games, and they're definitely personal projects. And I thought it'd be cool to have these guys share their perspective on what it's like making a game like that. So I think to start with, I should play. It's over there.
Look in your archaeological notebook.
Yeah. I'd like you guys to introduce yourselves and also introduce, I guess, like your starting point in making games or making art or game related stuff. Like, basically, how did you end up here?
Hello, I'm Mike Z. I was project lead on Skullgirls, and I ended up here because it took a really long time to figure out how to quit the job I didn't like at a bigger game developer, and then they got shut down, so it was made a lot easier. And they offered me the chance to continue. Basically, it was Pandemic Studios, and they offered me the chance to continue and come with the team to EA or not. And I said, totally not, because that was a move I wasn't willing to make, and I was really excited about our project. So I guess that's how I ended up here, also by car.
Hi guys, I'm James Montagna from Way Forward Technologies, and let's see, how I got started in games. You have to excuse me, I'm like getting over a cold, by the way, so I'd sound all terrible. I think when I was like 3 years old, I decided like, hey, I want to make games, and I like told my parents like, hey, I want to make video games. Like, yeah, you're 3, shut up. Like, but growing up, I was really close with my sister, and we'd always play video games together, and we were like playing like Mortal Kombat, like writing down all the combos, and like I think that was like when I had my epiphany, because it was just like a way for us to connect with each other and become closer to each other. That I wanted to make games that gave that experience to other people, just kind of brought people together. So maybe when I was a kid, I decided I wanted to make video games, and so I started just making games like on paper plates, just like drawing them out, and eventually, somehow I got a job eventually. That's it.
Most of us have had similar experiences. Are they paying you for this yet?
They pay me in Otter Pops.
They promise you stuff. Yeah.
I want in on that.
It's actually something, yeah. My name is Alex Ahad. I'm the creative director for Skullgirls. So I was in charge of like the art direction and also just the general look in the world setting. I guess like it's kind of I'm almost opposite in terms of my history in regards to Mike because I'm actually relatively new to the game industry. This is like my first like major thing at all. I've never been in like a large game studio. I was at Gaia Online before Skullgirls, but that's also not like Pandemic or anything like a large company or anything in that regard. So my experience with games prior to that was a little bit not as diverse or as traditional. So it's kind of interesting, having this project that I had the idea for back in college kind of build up into something like physical and real. Because back in college, I just thought it was just something I was thinking for fun, inspired by Melty Blood and EFZ and just seeing Dojin games, and I wanted to try that out over here. And I was designing like characters for the hell of it over time during high school and college, and they ended up compiling a bunch of them together and thinking of like a hypothetical game. And then some mutual friends between Mike and I from the fan game community mentioned that Mike had an engine but no art, and I had art but like no programming or engine. So we kind of combined our resources to make Skullgirls start happening. And like he was mentioning, he was at Pandemic at first, and I was still at Gaia, so we would work on it after hours. And then eventually, Pandemic like dissolved, and like I decided to make the jump to go to SoCal, and we try to pursue it more seriously. And yeah, that's when things got more like official, I guess, or something, right? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Derek Yu. I started making games really early on, just by myself or with friends. I was pretty actively involved in the click and play community when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So click and play is like this game making tool that came out in the 80s. And yeah, when I found out about it, I told my mom to get it for me. And it lets you make games really easily. It's got everything built in, like scripting and art editor and everything. So my friends and I would make, or really my friend and I would make games, and we'd upload them to AOL and stuff. And I pretty much just like did that. They released new versions of that program. Like there was one called Multimedia Fusion that came out when I was in high school, and yeah, essentially just me and this friend kept making games all through high school, releasing them as freeware. Eventually, when I was in college, I met a guy named Alec Coloca, and the two of us decided we were working on a game called I'm Okay, which was based on Jack Thompson's Modest
you made that too?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
So Jack Thompson, I don't know if you guys remember him, but he was like this big anti-video game crusader. He was like, video games are the reason why people are shooting up schools, and they're just they're making our youth into killers. And I think he was the one who coined the term murder simulator.
Yep.
But he wrote this really disgusting like game design document and dared the game industry to make a game based on it. And me and some friends, including Alec, decided to make this game for fun, and we released it. That's how I met Alec, and Alec and I, when we were talking about games, during this development, he showed me this idea for a game called Aquaria. It was just like a very basic prototype that he'd come up with, and the two of us decided pretty much on a whim to just spend 2 years making this game and actually try to sell it. And this is right around when independent games was like becoming a thing. It's when I first heard about it, at least. And so I think it was right around that time where it seemed like it was becoming viable. So we released the game. It did well enough that we could work on projects afterwards. And in the next few years, I made Spelunky, which came out on XBLA last year. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So
You should all play I'm Okay if you didn't. It's really awesome. Oh man, I didn't know that at all. Sorry. Yes.
I'm glad you played it.
Hi, I'm Mariel Cartwright. I'm the lead animator on Skullgirls. And I guess from early on, I knew that I always wanted to do art. But I don't think it was until college that I thought, like, well, I'm in college for 2D animation, maybe I could actually gear it toward learning how to, work in games. So toward the end of college, I started doing freelancing for different game companies. I did a bit on Silent Hill Shattered Memories, which is not an indie game, I guess. And a bunch of projects for Way Forward and the Scott Pilgrim game. And I was doing that for a couple of years before John introduced me to Alex, whose work I was a big fan of for a long time. And he had Skullgirls going on in everyone's spare time, and so I started to help out animating on that. And then, we got picked up in 2010, right? I think. And that's pretty much it. And then, since then I've been involved in Skullgirls.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Kim. I liked games when I was younger a lot. So when I first had internet and stuff, I would try to go in communities and find people that were like-minded and would talk to them and work on small projects with them together. And then when I went into college, I started the Mecha Fetus VZ blog or whatever, or not the VZ blog, but the Mecha Fetus itself before that. But then when I went to college, I met friends with Mariel and Paul Robertson and some other guys from school. And I started that project, and we just posted whatever, we just did whatever we wanted, which was pretty fun. And with that, Paul got hired for the Scott Pilgrim game. And when he started working on that, he hired us to be animators on that too. And that led us to my first experience working on a big title with a big publisher, Ubisoft, which is a pretty weird that I don't know, I didn't really experience too much. But yeah, from there, after that horrible thing that happened there, and we made a game from somehow survived it. Yeah, Alex he got his company backed up, and we were able to make Skullgirls, and so I joined as a senior animator and started working on that, and that's good times. Things were good after that. Okay.
Cool. Yeah. So let's see. So to start with, one thing that all your works really have in common is they definitely communicate to the player in a like a subtle and visual way. In particular, a lot of games might have they just spell out goals and objectives. But in all of your games, it's first of all, it's important in your games to be communicating to the player what they need to do and what's going on. But also, I can tell that because all of you have like kind of a visual background or a very like system-based background, your games communicate to the player in I think is a pretty like efficient manner. So like for anyone who wants to start off, like what do you think? How do you think your background in art or animation or in like designing systems kind of like helped you to communicate to the player in like I guess in a very rambly, but like in a very like straightforward way, and in a way that I think comes across more often in like smaller games and indie games. I don't know if
that was a lot of words.
I don't know if that makes sense. Actually, I don't know if that made any sense.
I think I could talk a little bit to that.
Yeah.
So for me, I've had experiences both working with a moderate size, yet still small company in Way Forward, but I also do a lot of solo projects. I have my own games that I make on my spare time outside of work. Like I go to work, I make games, I go home and I make games again. But like for me, the experience of communicating with the player in those realms are actually very different. Like maybe in my own projects, I'm less focused on that kind of thing. I'm just doing whatever the heck I want. But it's interesting, when I directed Adventure Time, Hey Ice King, for 3DS and DS, we had to specifically communicate certain things with the player, such as goals, like where they have to go, rules of the game. And one of the ways that we did that was through the voice of the characters. So I actually collaborated with Pendleton Ward, the creator of the series Adventure Time, and we wrote the script for the entire game together, just like back and forth. Like he would text or like call me at 2 a.m. like, dude, I got like a really cool idea, and I'm like, what, what's up? And we would like get it in the game, and it was like back and forth, and it was like a lot of fun. But sometimes we had a very specific goal for what we had to communicate, so we'd write it in plain text, and then we'd iterate on it through like the voice. Like we'd pick whatever character was best suited story-wise to communicate certain information. So maybe a lot of technical information would be through like the computer, the video game character BMO, and he's like your tutorial and walk you through the game. And so we had to really consider like ways that the player would connect with this information, yet keep it engaging and inside of the brand. And that was actually a bit of a challenge. I had to watch a lot of episodes of Adventure Time and really just like get my brain in that headspace. Yeah, it's like I'm complaining, but no, it was a blast, and we had a lot of fun writing it together. But just in writing the script for that game, I'd have to like think through the voice of the character. So I'd have to like watch an episode of like Lemon Grab and like get in his voice and like start typing whatever came to mind. And if it didn't sound like it came through him, I had to toss it. But definitely trying to consider the audience and what their understanding will be, and the personality of the characters was a bit of a challenge. But that was our approach to communicating with the player and having them understand objectives and goals. Let's see, I'm going to pass it on.